So I think that the best thing that we could do is maybe have some questions so that we could open up this field so it doesn't feel so much like it's just us going that direction, but we hear.
We know you're there.
From you, right?
Jose, how did the idea for the maps and Earth Ascending come about? They're absolutely fascinating, but they're also mind-boggling.
Well, to tell you the truth, it wasn't intentional. I had when I first signed a contract to do that book, it was not at all what the book ended up to be. And I think that the original title of the book was something like Art, Science, and Sacred Order, and it was going to be some type of survey of that ever popular science, geomancy, which I'm sure everybody here has heard of. Geomancy is what the Chinese call feng shui, the science of winds and waters. The geomancy is the best definition is geomancy is earth acupuncture. When they're talking about the earth being a living organism, the Gaia hypothesis. Okay? The earth is actually a living organism, which is new to us, but it's not new to most prehistoric or so-called primitive people, and actually through most of history. In any case, that was I signed a contract to do a book on that topic, and in the process of doing it, I had started to use some synthesizing kinds of diagrams in my teaching, but when I had discovered that, or when I had come across, I should say, the fact that the DNA code written in a binary language is the same as the ancient Chinese Book of Changes, the 64 hexagrams and 64 codons, that spurred me, and I began to suddenly see connections, and I was not in a normal state of mind or consciousness, and I really, well, I also refer to that as having been in a state of synchronistic race, in which one little synchronicity would go poof and open out and be all sorts of other connections. And I would wake up at 3:34 in the morning, or go downstairs with one other little synchronistic flash, and then I'd be doing these maps, and usually halfway through I would hear a little voice inside of me saying, what are you doing? You don't even know where this is going. It's a grown man like you who's out of a job doing something like this. Then I'd go, and then I'd get done with one map and say, well, that was pretty neat, it made sense, and then I'd do another one. It was just like it was like following a bouncing ball until I got to the code image, which tied everything all together. And I was very pleased, but even then I didn't really understand the book until I finished. I did all that in a 5-month period, from about February to June of 1983, and then the book finally was published in June of 84, and then I went over it very carefully and somewhat afraid, thinking, wondering whether it would make any sense to me anyway, and I found that, well, this is what my copy of the book looks like. I've been studying it ever since, because I found that it really had a lot of stuff in it, and it led me to many other things. It blew my mind, and I would say that in that process it seemed to have coincided with the involvement. We didn't talk too much about it, that we we had with the phenomenon called the Planet Art Network. When Earth Ascending came out at the same time, we began to put our energy into the Planet Art Network, or PAN, as it's also called, and it seemed that the information that was coming through in Earth Ascending was continuing to come through and inform our working with the Planet Art Network, which is basically a critical information gathering and disseminating, synthesizing and disseminating process, and it's very loose. It's amorphous, but I think that we also made. When we talk about this thing about the going over the threshold, learning post-history, we've made a commitment. We made a commitment to ourselves, and we made a commitment actually to the Earth, that we're here, that we throw a lot of our lives in to work on behalf of the Earth. We listen to the Earth, we talk to the Earth, we dance with the Earth, and we play with the Earth. And the Earth, we are part, when we get a really proper perspective on things, each one of us is a cell of this larger organism. And this larger organism itself, cohabits codependently with the rest of the larger hostess organism. And at this point, the larger hostess organism is speaking very freely and is sending out signals very freely and very urgently, and it's up to us to open and to receive them. The process that I followed in doing Earth Ascending is the same process that we continue to follow, which we have been urging through our activities and our communications to the Planet Art Network, and that is to surrender to the Earth. That's good, thank you. As far as Einstein and the theory of relativity goes, Einstein, as we know, has been mythologized in a number of different ways, maybe rightly and maybe wrongly. One of the ways is that he was looking for what's referred to as the unified field theory. The frustration that Einstein experienced, and others like him, in terms of unified field theory, only recently been approached. The main problem with unified field theory was that it didn't take into account the function of consciousness, and that people who followed Einstein, like particularly the scientists, the physicists like Bragg Creek and David Bohm and so on, have and into the quantum theorists have finally gotten to a place where it's clear that consciousness has something to do with the behavior of what we call matter, subatomic particles, and so on. But remember that there were real problems. Our language itself is so biased, so unconsciously and inherently biased to assume a separation between ourselves and nature, that we might just be dealing with a linguistic problem. The physics might be just like a linguistic problem. there is only resonance. Now, as far as Von Däniken goes, Von Däniken was famous because of his chariot of the gods idea, and that somehow or other astronauts or beings from other planets or other systems have visited our planet, and Von Däniken claimed to have proof of this in all sorts of different archaeological tidbits that he inferred were actually the descriptions of the depictions of astronauts from outer space, and that these early astronauts who came here then were mythologized as the gods of ancient history. The problem with Von Däniken's method is that, which is the problem of many archaeologists, is that they project what we know in our present experience of the past. So we have a particular idea of what astronauts look like, and we have a particular idea of what spaceships look like. And so whenever Von Däniken would find something like that, then he would make that connection. That's somewhat dangerous or erroneous type of approach. On the other hand, I think it would be a mistake to think that we are alone. I think it would also be a mistake to think that there have not been communications that have occurred and still are occurring on this planet between consciousness of this planet and consciousness of other systems. It's just that just because we operate within the confines of a mechanistic paradigm doesn't mean that the rest of the universe is operating in the same paradigm. So, communication, as Carl Sagan would like to have it, with his search for extraterrestrial intelligence, he's operating within a mechanistic paradigm. It takes a whole set of probabilities and thinks, okay, well, there might be something here, there might be something here. If there's advanced intelligence and advanced consciousness, it's not going to operate mechanistically. That's very clumsy. And also, there's advanced consciousness and advanced intelligence. It's all pervasive. We don't have to go someplace else to find it, or to hear about it, or to know about it. That's sort of where I get back to where we are at this point is we're actually beginning to experience an evolutionary shift. An evolutionary shift, a shift that is an adjustment in the planetary frequency, an adjustment in our consciousness, ultimately an adjustment in our whole biological way of being. Right there.
What is your conception of God, and where do you suppose God came from?
Well, my conception of God, and where I don't suppose God came from anywhere. And in some ways I don't even particularly in my own personal way of going about things, I don't usually refer to God. I certainly don't, when we're talking about God as an entity separate, an entity of our consciousness separate from what we know and what we experience, I definitely don't see it quite in that way. If we refer to God as the sublime, all-pervasive, ineffable quality that informs the purest and most noble experiences that we're capable of,
Well, I just would like to just jump in with bringing in the phrase spirituality and human spirituality, because I feel like we've had such a kind of prejudice, in a sense, about religion. I mean, this is the split, science not wanting to look at the ineffable, or, what's the ineffable nature of our being. And I think in our whole education, how we've been brought through and how we've somehow put Einstein as a god, let's say, just for example, where we put outside of ourselves a very arbitrary kind of system of how reality works. What I think is important for me in how I've been working is understanding spirituality as my fundamental relationship to the ineffable, that I am willing to suspend judgment and to be good to myself, to explore the ineffable, and therefore also enjoy it in others. And so maybe we could hear from you what your definition is of God.
I really don't have one.
Well, yeah, and I think ineffable is a good word. I like to bring that word through because I think it's hard. Our words are not very good at describing the ineffable. That's almost a paradox, right? Words describe the ineffable. It doesn't. That can't be sometimes. So it seems to point to our being in touch with the ineffable, which comes through our senses and how we are, rather than what we think and say. I want to make one little pitch for the whole idea of, we live in this computer age, so I'm sure we've all heard the expression that computers are only as good as the information we feed into it. Well, I'd like to propose, if we looked at our mind as a very advanced computer system, we could say that if we only feed our mind a linear verbal form, and we only feed our mind what somebody else has put into us, we aren't really getting the information firsthand. So some of the work we've been doing is in looking at how can we become more primary to our senses, so that we have a primary relationship to Mother Earth, to our field, that we actually trust our eyes to see what we see, to smell what we smell, to literally hear and to use our voice and to feel our whole bodies. And I think that something of embodying ourselves again is very important in this transition time. It's like getting back into our being in order to allow the ineffable, now that's a paradox, but give up, right? There's something of giving up into our being. We have everything we need, and there has to be some relaxation in order to let the ineffable or God or whatever, however we define it, be with us in bringing spirit into our lives. So I hope that made some sense. Oh gosh.
Actually, I have quite a few questions, but first off, in your Earth Ascending, you had some models apparently from the Aztec civilization where they had evolved holonomic models of how things operate. And you were speaking earlier about the binary code and so on. They integrated all this into their so-called models. And I'm wondering why you feel, or what that represented at that point for that civilization, and why it sort of had no follow-through, carry-through up into our modern civilization.
Yeah, okay. Actually, it wasn't the Aztec, it was the Maya. Okay? And that's a very interesting point that you brought up. And since publication of Earth Ascending several years ago, I have intensified my understanding and research into precisely the matter that you're bringing up that has to do with the Maya. I had studied for some 30 years the civilization of the Maya, and particularly the calendar and the mathematics and the astronomy of the Maya. And I, like everybody else who has thrown themselves into it, was always impressed with the incredible sophistication of Mayan mathematics, Mayan astronomy, Mayans used, understanding the Mayans had, the rest of the solar system. I'm impressed with that, and in contrast with their relatively simple way of life. There was they practiced agriculture and architecture and hieroglyphic writing, but we're content with a relatively simple level of technological, what we call technological advancement. Okay? And also, the other part of it is they had this fantastic civilization which flourished for close to 500 years. And then sometime in the 9th century AD, poof, where did they go? What happened? And that was always puzzlement. And about a year and a half ago, I started receiving phone calls in the middle of the night from a Mayan named Humbat's men. And this was one of these kind of slightly out of I kept having this feeling of one of these characters on Carlos Castaneda novel, Stalking Me. So we'd have our pidgin English, pidgin Spanish conversations in the middle of the night. And one week he'd been in New York, Los Angeles. Finally we got him to come to Boulder. I was very intrigued by some of the things that he had sent me, and I had always wanted to know if there was still this stuff being transmitted, in some type of living lineage from the ancient times. It seemed like here it was, it comes from by the Mayan, and he was a very sweet man. Got him to give a talk on Mayan astrology. Sponsored by the Planetary Network, gave a talk on Mayan astrology at George Washington Elementary School in Boulder, Colorado, where the night custodian got all hyped because Humbat's he had a table like this.
And we were informed there could be no open flame in the elementary school.
And he's conducting the ceremony, this rite, and he's sitting there watching it saying, wait, is this Atlantis? Where am I?
And the
janitor saying, no, you don't do that. He was very good. She forgave the janitor. This is how it is in this time. Anyway, Humbat's had been instructed to get the word out through whatever few qualified people might be able to hear him in our part of the world north of the Rio Grande. So I was very, very happy because my meetings with him and my discussion, my talks with him, particularly the meeting that we had when he was in Boulder, just like that, catalyzed 30 years of research for me and totally put the whole thing in a light that I had hardly suspected before. There was some sense of that. In Earth Ascending, I had gleaned that what we call the Mayan calendar was somehow or other related to sunspot cycles. And I had some sense that the Mayans were actually, my feeling of them, the Mayans were perhaps more advanced than we were, which to us in history is hard to usually accept. What do you mean? We are conditioning. But from my contact with Humbat, it seemed very clear that this was the case. And not only did it seem clear, it was very clear that yes, indeed, what we refer to as the Mayan calendar, the 260-day count that repeats over and over and over again, was indeed related to sunspot cycle activity. And that the Maya also were representatives of what we might call a community of galactic intelligence. As Humboldt's man put it, this planet and this star system are the 7th such star system that the Mayans have been navigating and charting. So when we usually hear information like that, we say, well, what are we supposed to do with that? What does that mean? And again, I knew that if indeed they were more advanced, that they also weren't flying around in jet fuel tin cans to get from one place in the galaxy to another, so that there was something else that was cooking there. It also got me back to looking at all the Mayan information once again, and when I looked at it, it was all as if I was seeing it for the first time in a totally clear and fresh light. We went down through the Yucatan last December and January and made some contact down there. And it was, upon returning, it was very clear to me how what the whole thing was about. One of the things that I went back and looked at was before we get to that, we said, well, what were they doing here? What was all that about? Okay. The Maya were here and still are here, but their presence here basically was to leave some very direct clues about what is actually happening in the solar system, what our planet and what the different planets in the solar system represent, and what the relationship of our solar system is to a few other, some more evolved systems in the rest of the galaxy. I went back and looked at the information. I said, oh, there it all is. One of the things that has always puzzled the archaeologists is what's called the puzzle is, why did they leave these really, really elaborate monuments that have these incredibly precise dates on them? Every 5 years, every 10 years, every 20 years, every 52 years, every 4 years, date these things that correlate cycles of Earth, Venus, cycles of Earth, Mars, cycles of Earth, the Moon, and their understanding of the time it takes the Earth to go around the Sun was spot on. What we have today, 365.2422 days, and they were making every day. They would make precise adjustments. Every 20 years, make a real precise adjustment. And what people were missing, what were they adjusting it to, or what were they adjusting it from? Look at it, what the Mayan mathematics, as it's called, is actually a description of particular harmonic operations. Very simple. So I went back and looked at, from the Mayan point of view, what we call the solar system is the central unit, the sun, which the Mayan call kin, and then what we call the planets. From the Mayan point of view, the solar system is like a oscillating wave pattern. The planets are harmonic gyroscopes. So you have, like Kepler knew that there were different intervals, that there were harmonic intervals between the planets. That's how the asteroid belt was discovered finally between Mars and Jupiter. That's how Herschel figured out where to train his telescope and discover Uranus in 1781, and so on. Okay, the planets seem to have a harmonic relationship to each other, so that the whole solar system is like a oscillating harmonic field. The planets themselves are like the harmonic gyroscopes that keep the different resonant phases represented by the orbits of the planets, in resonance. So in other words, we know our planet that we're on is actually like a gyroscope. It has a 23.5-degree tilt. While it goes back and forth like that, follows this little trajectory. As I said at the outset, we also know that the planet has a particular resonant frequency. So there's a very close relationship between the resonant frequency of the planet and the tilt. Okay? That there has to be a very delicate balance between the resonant frequency and the tilt. So all what the Maya were doing here was, which is all left behind in the numbers there, showing this is the resonant frequencies, this is the relationship of the orbit of the planet to a galactic harmonic. And if you look at it very carefully, then you see where we are in this whole harmonic spectrum. Okay, so the other thing then to look at was the archaeologists are saying, why did the Mayan monuments, when they by their own dating, that they were already 3,000 plus years from the beginning of their dating system. The dating system goes back to a date that is variously placed between August 6th and August 13th in the year 3113 BC. Remember, Pharaoh Menes of Egypt unified Upper Lower Egypt 3100 BC circa. Okay, so 3113 BC is the beginning of what is usually referred to as the Mayan Great Cycle. The Mayan Great Cycle goes through 13 basic periods, which actually, if you read them through mathematically, is a series of harmonic calibrations that run from 3113 BC to, interesting date, 2012 AD. What does that mean? What it means is that, and we're talking about going from prehistory to history, and from history to post-history. And as I said, we're in the outer suburbs of post-history right now. We're in an evolutionary slide at this point. Everything that's happening, all the Chernobyls and all the terrorisms and all the carbon dioxide and all the confusion about whether we're in a greenhouse at the beginning of an ice age, all of that because we're in an irreversible evolutionary slide. Now, what that period of time between 3113 BC, look at that, well, that's when history began, to 2012 AD. It's like, if you imagine, like a lighthouse, there's a boat out in the sea, and it's traveling along like this. This lighthouse is a real big beam, and at one point, the boat enters the beam, and for a while there, it's traveling through, the boat is in the beam, and at one point the beam moves off. We have been and are in a particular galactic resonance beam. We entered that beam 3113 BC, and we leave that beam 2012 AD. And this is almost like let's look at it almost as a acceleration beam. It's during this period of time that our whole historical process has accelerated, our communication pathways, and we get to this point where we are now. Okay, it's interesting. As we look at it, where are we now? We are. We look at this whole thing from the point of view of resonance. Where we are now, we're compared to where we were at 3113 BC, we are in a state of maximum dissonance. That mean by that, it's actual. Not only do we have dissonance in terms of all of our jargon and our garbage that we throw at each other every day. Dissonance in terms of the fact of
600 pounds of toxic waste are deposited yearly. That's for every
Dissonance. You know, dissonance in terms of the oxygen of the planet being quickly absorbed because of the deforestation both in the Amazon and in Africa, and the generation of carbon dioxide. Dissonance in terms of underground testing. Dissonance in the fact that we have an unprecedented situation since 1945 on this planet. Up to that point, we did not have steady-state background radioactivity on this planet. Since 1945, we've introduced a new atmospheric condition, which is steady-state background radioactivity. We can adjust to it, but only if it doesn't get too much more dissonant. And then one final thing is electromagnetic dissonance. That we, at this point, we are just randomly and haphazardly, and again, this is only the last 50 years, randomly and haphazardly bombarding ourselves with electromagnetic pollution. Radio waves, television waves, radar waves, microwaves. And there's a new field, a study called bioelectromagnetic medicine, which is showing, people are losing their jobs for this, is showing that the electromagnetic dissonance that we've introduced into our atmosphere affects the DNA, because what we now know is the DNA is actually is controlled by a vibratory electromagnetic infrastructure. So we're doing all this to ourselves. This is why we're all crazy. This is why everything is the way it is right now. So we're at a point of reaching a point of maximum distance. The great scientist Nikola Tesla knew all about this. He knew about the Earth's resonant field. He also knew that we could work with this field. He also knew that if we wanted to be really nasty, we could maximize the distance. We get to a certain point of dissonance that then the Earth, because it's a very delicate balance between the axis wobble and the overall resonant frequency. We wanted to, we could manipulate this resonant frequency in such a way that at one point the Earth would crack open like dropping an apple, watching it split apart. So, the Russian and American military have all of this information. So, we're in a very, very interesting state right now. So that's why I say it's out of control. In one way. In another way, remember that the Earth is a living organism. When we get sick, basically our bodies know how to heal themselves. And the Earth knows how to heal itself. In my book, Earth Ascending, I refer to 5 stages of development, evolution of consciousness development. Stage 1 is nature presents itself. Stage 2 is man learns from nature. Stage 3 is man transforms nature. That's the history part. Stage 4 is nature evaluates man's transformation. And this is where we are. And in the next few years, it's already begun. In the next few years, it will be continuing. And we can participate in that by becoming resonant, really becoming harmonic. That was starting to answer your question. Just to let you know where it got me.
I'm going to ask you also, following the development of books that you put out, usually from Mandela onwards, was that an evolution within your own consciousness? How did that all stand within your own consciousness?
Well, there's only, to me, everyone is a seeker of truth. And
together the idea of the crystal grid network and the focused points of using crystals themselves to tune in to the Earth?
Well, I'd like to answer that because that is a real field phenomenon. That's not something that Jose specifically did that isn't being done on a very massive scale. I mean, the use of crystals is so widespread. The best crystal story we heard was someone had gotten a channeling in California early on about burying some crystals on the land, and they didn't know where to get crystals. So they went out and got the old, the old radios had crystals in them, and they actually buried a couple radios. Now that was the best crystal story, we have to tell you, in terms of how this information is in the field. I mean, I think this goes back to when Jose spoke of nature evaluating man's transformation. I think that the Earth's message about crystals are somewhat friends of ours, I think, and that this is a very ancient knowledge that we are just being reawakened to. And so I think the crystals are literally speaking out. And it's so widespread that the Crystal Earth Gridwork Project, Beth Hawkins and her husband out of Governor State University have done a lot of work. Beth works with her students. She just gives her students a globe, and in the university they walk around the campus with a globe in their arms, and they just map out these grid lines. And it's based on a system, I think it somewhat came out of originally on Dr. Fuller's.
Well, actually, first it's a conglomerate from actually Plato talks about it. Talks about icosahedron being like a planet being made like an icosahedron, as if you took some leather triangles and sewed them all together. And Dr. Fuller's work with them, I've seen it.
And something, the implication there is that there is an etheric body to the planet. If the Earth is a living organism, it too has its conscious field, just as we each have our conscious field as individual human organisms. So the planet has that same phenomenon. So I think all of this work just points to seeing other levels of reality and other levels of being. And we happened to meet a Native American woman named Dahani Yahu, who was a Cherokee lineage holder, and when she met us, she just looked at us and said, well, your minds are very close, you should work with crystals. And being the seekers that we are, we said, well, so we went down to our local store in Boulder that had some crystals and picked out a couple. And for me, the transmission I got from a crystal is to see a crystal change and grow as I was working with it. And that, from my educational background, that told me the mineral kingdom is dead, right? I mean, I think it's a real simple statement from Mother Earth that these crystals are a gift to show us that crystals vibrate at a frequency, they are resonant carriers, and as I understand it, crystals vibrate at such a high frequency, and as Jose has been speaking of resonant harmonies and so on, that what we're being asked to look at is how we resonate, or that we are an ever-changing entity, and that the crystal itself is as well, and maybe the crystals are here to be worked with and be taught by somehow. I think I'd like to make a statement, since we said we've been on the New Age circuit, I'd like to make a statement about channeling, because I'm sure you've all heard people who are channeled, and I think in terms of how Jose wrote in Earth Ascending about the psi bank, it's spelled PSI, the psi bank being the mental field of the planet, that in fact we all have this consciousness that is totally capable of tuning into a greater field of awareness. And I think it's very tricky, and I think I would recommend to everyone that you be very cautious as you listen to people channeling, because you don't really know if they're getting pure intelligence or is it somewhat their gossip of their own mind and filtering it. So I just thought I'd put in that little rap about some of these phenomena that are really happening on a widespread basis that we don't know that much about yet. So I think I'm talking about staying open and really trusting our own receptors, our own senses and our own gut level feeling. I mean, that idea of gut level, our belly and our belly in connection to Mother Earth's belly, that's something of really tuning into our own intelligence is really important in this process we're going through. When you're standing on the threshold, you sure as heck know what you're leaving behind, and that can be very conscious in your choice, but you don't always know what you're moving into. And if you jump too fast, you may end up just reading your own projections rather than seeing what is really going on. So something about coming into our own being is how we've been working.
Like image of the people who get messages. One way to get a message, I'm not suggesting anyone do this, but it's an analogy, is that you have a bowl of water on a table and it's outside, and the way you get the message is that you have to wait until the first wind comes up and sends the first ripple across the water, and then the pattern, the ripple of water from the wind that comes up is a message. What happens with us, and that's a good example, because what happens with us a lot of times is that we will have our table out there in a bowl of water, and we'll get anxious waiting for the wind, and we might shake the table a little bit, and there'll be a pattern there, but it's the pattern of our anxiety. It's a real fine art to really be resonant. And one of the slogans that has come to us is listen as an acronym. Listen, let intelligence silently tingle every nerve. We really listen. Everything is listening. It's not just ears. Seems like
It's probably a good place to conclude our presentation. And we do have two handouts here that just explain a little bit more about Planetary Network and the work we've been doing. So you're welcome to take one if you'd like. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Because if you hadn't been here with us, we literally co-precipitate this field together. And so this resonant field happened because all of you came and because we were here. So thank you.